Alright, so for the second podcast on the quadratic formula, I'm just going to see some different kinds of examples here. So once again, here we are solving quadratic equations that can't be factored. When they can't be factored, we can use that quadratic formula. And even if it can't be factored, remember, you can still always use the quadratic formula. But let's look at these different kinds of examples. Alright, so number 5 says 2 equals negative 4x plus 8x. So if you look at this, this is not ready to solve yet because it's not in standard form. Okay, so the direction says write it in standard form, then solve it. Okay, because once again, when we use our quadratic formula, we have to plug in our a number, our b number, and our c. And remember, the quadratic formula, we're always setting it equal to 0 because that's where the x-intercepts are. That's really what the answers mean. So if you look here, this one is not ready to go because here's my a, here's my b, but I need to move my c over to the same side. Okay, so it's got to be set up right first. So to move this 2 over here, same way we've been doing all year, to move it by doing the opposite, we're going to do minus 2 on both sides. So now it's 0 on this side equals negative 4x squared plus 8x minus 2. Alright, so now it's ready to go. Now if you don't like the 0 on this side, remember our symmetric property, we can flip the sides of the equation. So if you prefer to just move the right side over to the left, and then move the left side to the right, we can do that. Okay, so now when we use our quadratic formula, here's our a, here's our b, here's our c. Remember, we are always including the sign in front as part of the term. Okay, alright, so we've already practiced kind of writing the formula out, so I'm just going to go straight to the plug-in. So remember, it's going to be negative b, remember it's always a negative in the front, plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to go back and plug all that in later. And the bottom is 2a. Okay? So now if I go back and plug it in, my b value is positive 8. So this was b plus or minus b squared minus 4. A is a negative 4. And my c is a negative 2. My a is a negative 4. Alright, so that's what our quadratic formula will look like now that we've rearranged the equation and plugged in our a, b, and c terms. Alright, so now remember, so we're going to simplify this. So this is going to turn into negative 8, the negative times the 8, plus or minus square root of, now remember, we're going to simplify everything under the radical in our calculator. So we're going to have 8 squared minus 4, parentheses, our a was negative 4, and our c, let me double check that, c was 2, right? Whoop, negative 2. Okay, so all that inside there is going to equal 32. Okay, so the top is negative 8 plus or minus square root of 32 over 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. Okay, so now remember, we're going to split this into 2 problems. We're going to do it with the plus, and we're going to do it with the minus. Alright, so first problem would be negative 8 plus square root of 32 over negative 8. The second problem will be negative 8 minus square root of 32 over negative 8. Alright, so let's go ahead and go plug that into our calculator now. So remember, get your fraction. Shortcut is alpha y. Choose number 1 and over d. So this was going to be negative 8 plus square root of 32. That's our top. And the bottom was negative 8. Hit enter. And we get this long decimal. Remember, we're going to round it to the first decimal. So instead of 0.29, this number tells me to round the 2 up. So here we have positive 0.3. Okay? And then let's go back and do the one with the minus sign. Alright, so let's get our fraction. Alpha y equals, and over d, now it's negative 8 minus square root of 32. Almost the exact same one, just with the minus, over negative 8 still. And here we get a 1.7 We'll round it there. Alright, so as you can see here, so x equals two values, 0.3, 1.7. Alright, now remember we also kind of talked about, always go back and verify. So remember the answers, when you factor it and solve it, the answer is where the parabola, remember parabola is this shape, it's where it crosses the x-axis. So here, because we have two answers, it should cross the x-axis in two spots. So let's go back and graph it and just make sure that it does that. Okay. So let's go to our y equals, and our equation after we moved everything around, negative 4x squared plus 8x minus 2. Let's graph it. Alright, so the parabola is upside down, but it does touch in two places. And we should have two answers, or they might call it roots, two roots. Okay? Alright, so this one, number 6, we have 3x squared equals 4x plus 5. Okay? Now just remember, so technically it doesn't matter which side I move it to, as long as I get everything on one side. Okay? So I can move both of these here, or I can just move this one here. I'm going to move this one here because it's one less step. So I'm going to move the 3x squared by doing minus 3x squared on both sides. That's gone. 0 equals. Now I'm going to put this one first. That's my a term. Negative 3x squared. That's a positive 4x, so I put plus 4x plus 5. Now it's in standard form. Now I can plug in my a, my b, and my c. Okay, so using our quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. All of that over 2a. Alright, let's go back and plug it in. Our b is positive 4, so I'll plug in a 4. This b squared, plug in 4. A is a negative 3. C is a positive 5. And the bottom 2a, a is negative 3. Alright, so let's clean it up again. So, negative times 4 is just negative 4, plus or minus square root. Now let's go back and simplify this. So we're going to punch in all that stuff under the radical. Let's quit this one. Alright, so under the radical we had 4 squared minus 4 times a. I'm going to go back and look. Our a was negative 3, and our c was positive 5. So the whole radical simplifies to 76. Alright? The bottom will just be 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. Okay? Alright, so now we're going to split this up into the plus, negative 4 plus square root of 76 over negative 6, and negative 4 minus square root of 76 over 6, negative 6. Okay? Alright, so let's go ahead and go do that. Get our fraction, negative 4 plus square root, that's wrong, square root of 76 over negative 6, right? Yeah. Okay, so now that we've punched all that in, let's see what we get for our first answer. Negative 7.8. This tells me to round the 7 up, so it'll be negative 0.8. So the first answer is negative 0.8. And let's go type in the one with the minus sign now. Alright, get our fraction. Still negative 4, but now it's minus square root of 76. Put that all over negative 6, and we get positive 2.11. This one means don't round this up, so it's just 2.1. Alright, so finally our x equals negative 0.8 and 2.1. Write that again. X equals negative 0.8 and 2.1. Alright, so once again, let's just double check that we should have two answers where the parabola crosses two times. Alright, let's see here. Go to our graphing screen. Let's clear this last one out. So once we moved everything together, the equation was now negative 3x plus 4x plus 5. Let's graph it. And let's see where the parabola crosses. In two places we should have two answers. One's negative on this side, one's positive. So we're probably good there. Okay? Alright, let's do these last two. Now once again, this is not ready to solve. Here's my A, here's my B. Gotta move the C over. Alright, so we're going to move it over by doing plus 9. So now we have x squared minus 5x plus 9 equals 0. Okay, now we're going to go plug in our A, B's, and C's. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. All that over 2a. Alright, so let's go plug in. Alright, my b is negative 5, so I got to plug in a negative 5 even though that negative's outside of it. B squared, negative 5. A is, remember when there's no coefficient it means 1, so my A is 1. My C is 9. And once again, 2 times A is 1. Alright, so let's clean all this up. So a negative times a negative 5, that makes this 5 positive. Plus or minus square root. So now we're going to go plug the inside in down here. Okay? Alright. So here we had negative 5 in parentheses squared minus 4. A was 1. And C was 9. And we got negative 11. Okay? And then the bottom is 2 times 1, which is just 2. Alright, so now, if you see something kind of unusual here, then you're kind of looking right. But watch what's going to happen. So now if I split this up, 5 plus square root of negative 11 over 2, or 5 minus square root of negative 11 over 2. Alright, so let's go punch these in and see what answer the calculator gives us here. Alright, let's get our fraction set up. 5 plus square root, and inside the radical is a negative 11. And all that was over 2. Enter. We've got an error. It's a not real answer. Okay? So that means the calculator can't do it. So in this case, there's no answer for this one. Let's go try the one with the minus now. So let's quit that. Alright, so let's try this again. Get our fraction, and now it's going to be 5 minus square root of negative 11, all that over 2. Let's see what we get here. I got another error. Okay? So basically, x it's basically empty set, or there's no answer. Alright, let's see why that is. And here's the thing, if you notice this is why the answer is, it can't be done. Look at what's inside the square root sign. Negative 11. Remember, we can't do square roots of negatives. It's impossible. Okay? So, let's just prove it on the calculator. Okay, so I'm going to go back, and I'm going to type in my equation in standard form. X squared minus 5x plus 9. So, well, let's go graph that. Okay. Alright, let's clear this one out. X squared minus 5x plus 9. Now let's look at the graph of the parabola. Even though we didn't have an answer, there will be a parabola, but look at the parabola. Remember, the answers are where it touches the x. This parabola never touches the x-axis. So we shouldn't have an answer. There are no answers. Right? Remember we learned earlier, if it touches 2 times, there's 2 answers. If it touches in one place, there's 1 answer. If it doesn't touch anywhere, there is no answer. Alright, so that's just a way to prove it. We have no answer for this one. Alright, so that can happen. Okay? Alright, last example here. Now we've got 16 equals negative x squared plus 8x. I'm just going to move the 16, so it's only one step by doing minus 16. My equation is now 0 equals negative x squared plus 8x minus 16. Alright, so now let's go into our quadratic formula, plug in our a's, b's, and c's. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. All that over 2 times a. Alright, let's go get our numbers here. So negative b is 8. And then b squared, plug in my 8. Minus 4a, remember this negative x squared is negative 1. So I got to plug in a negative 1 there. And that c is a negative 16. Make sure you got all those negatives. And then a on the bottom, negative 1 again. Alright, so let's go use our calculator and simplify the inside of the radical. But first, negative times 8 is just negative 8. Plus or minus square root of, now let's go do this, 8 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 16. Okay. Alright, so 8 in parentheses squared minus 4. Parentheses a was negative 1. C was negative 16. And all that will equal 0. Okay? So, let's go plug that in. And then on the bottom, here we have 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2. Okay? Let me double check something here. It's 4, negative 1, negative 16. Okay. Alright, so now let's go ahead and simplify the quadratic formula. So if I split it 2 times, I'm going to have negative 8 plus square root of 0 over negative 2. I'm going to have negative 8 minus square root of 0 over negative 2. Okay? Alright, so get your fraction. Whoops. Okay. Alright, so on the top, negative 8 plus square root of 0, and all that was over negative 2. And here we get 4, positive 4. Nice whole number answer. Okay? Now let's try it with the minus the square root. Get a fraction. So now we got negative 8 minus square root of 0 over negative 2. That's weird. I got the same answer. Got a positive 4 again. So, if I do my final answer, x just equals 4. They're the same answer. One's not positive, one's not negative. So I only have one answer. Alright, once again, let's check it with the graph. Okay, the graph will always let us know. So let's go put our equation in standard form in the calculator. Negative x squared plus 8x minus 16. Okay, let's clear that. Negative x squared plus 8x minus 16. Let's graph it. Let's see what happens. Alright, so here's another of those weird examples. This parabola, it only touches the x-axis in one place, right here. So that's why we should only have one answer. Okay? So as you're using your quadratic formula, always just verify, not what the answer is, but how many answers you should have. So once again, a lot of times it'll be 2 answers. Sometimes it can be no answers. Sometimes it's 1 answer. It's all about how many places the parabola touches the x-axis. Alright, so go ahead and practice on your own. Remember, be very careful about writing the formula, plugging it in carefully. Use the calculator after that, but then always use the graph to double check your answers. Okay, that's a very valuable skill.